What is the most creepy, unnerving experience that's ever happened to you? Serious. Part 2. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. When I was around 11 or so, I came back from school to our apartment building and got into the lift. Saw this guy with glasses and reddish hair in the corner look at me, but didn't think anything of it. I walked into my apartment and the door was still unlocked as I had just walked in and went to pet my dog first. The lift guy came into my home and closed the door behind him. My dog jumped on him so he left. To this day I think of afar would have happened had my doggo not been there. Unnerving AF. I work on mopeds and motorbikes as a hobby. A mechanic friend of mine struck a sort of deal. I can do whatever project I want in his workshop. Fuck about all I want, and if I need his help, he'll help. However, if he needs some shit done, picked up, delivered, just shit he doesn't get to and that don't require mechanic skill, I do them. He used to have his workshop at a 2-5 ride from my house. I only ride motorbikes, I do not drive cars. I'd often go there Sunday night and return Wednesday afternoon. The way there was pretty boring. I get on the highway near my place, get off at 2-5 hours later near his, take a left, a right and a left and I'm there. I've ridden this stretch hundreds of times and know it by heart. One day I get on my bike to ride there, I turn onto the highway and cross underneath a flyover. At this point I am riding for about 3 minutes. The sun is shining annoyingly in my eyes, and when I reappear from underneath the flyover, which took me like 2 seconds, it's even brighter and more white. For what seems like a second I am blinded and can see nothing. Then the sun changes position in the sky and I can focus my eyes on the road. I damn near miss the exit near my friend's place, but I make it. Dumbfounded I arrive at his place a couple minutes later. Absolutely shocked I check my watch, my phone and my display clock. All of them confirm my feeling. I've only been riding for 6 minutes. I ask my friend for the time and he gives me the same times. Comments on how white I look and if everything is okay. I tell him what I experienced, he laughs it off and pours me a coffee. Till this day I have no clue what happened. It has never happened again after that. Did I just forgot about 2 hours and 20 minutes of my trip, because it was so mundane to me? While also remembering my departure time wrong? Possibly. I have no proof I left at the time I think I did. Did I pass into another dimension? Personally I don't believe so, but who knows? Maybe I did and I passed into a parallel universe where there's one more of me. Or maybe all of this was just a dream that seemed so damn real that over the years I accepted it as real? I call it the Devil's Den nightmare. I had a series of dreams over the course of 2 weeks about a house with a familiar tone and setting. Taken from different times in my life, the house was pieced together by memories of different places I had lived. Now the reason I call it the Devil's Den is because of the host of my venture. It was someone I knew once, but don't know anymore. I was never able to place the name or the face to someone I knew. You walk into the main foyer with a kitchen bar to the left and the living room with a large roundabout couch and a TV over the fireplace across from it. Straight ahead is a dark hallway lit by a single red candle. Behind the living room is the patio, with an extensive view of the Rocky Mountains. To the left of the patio is another long dark hallway, unlit. I remember the first 4 dreams. As they were the most jarring. I am not a lucid dreamer and I barely remember most of the dreams I have. But these have stuck with me for almost a year now. I walk up to the house, seemingly appearing there out of thin air. I check my surroundings, turn around to see how I got here, examine the road. I make a conscious decision to go into the house. As I turn the doorknob I feel a shift in my mind. Something has changed but I can't quite place it. I walk inside and I'm greeted by a red-tinted vision of a house I've been to once. Most of my immediate family is to my right on the couch watching TV. A man is in the kitchen prepping food and dishes for his guests. I notice that my grandpa isn't there, which is weird considering he had died 2 years prior and is probably the most influential man in my life. The man in the kitchen greets me, but doesn't acknowledge my existence in this realm. I remember the voice resonating from him as he asks, "Hello. Welcome to my home. Are you ready for your trials? I hope so, you have a lot of work to do." I felt the control of my actions. As if I actually made them. I turned around and tried to leave but the doorway led to darkness. So I decided that I might as well just go through with it. The man says, "Great, glad you decided to stay for supper. Head down the hallway directly in front of you and the first door to your right. Please wash your hands before we eat. It would be most unfavorable if you didn't." So I did, and that's when it starts. Each room is a puzzle. Each completed puzzle unlocks a new room and deteriorates the dream. There are 24 rooms in total, 12 down each hallway. After every puzzle, the dream would seem to shift, as if ever changing. Always thinking of something new to keep me busy. Over the course of 4 days having this dream over and over again, I completed 14 of these puzzle rooms. By that time most of my family wasn't in the house anymore. Also the couch was gone, replaced by pyres, and the fireplace was melted and twisted with metal fire still very much alive. Above the fireplace where the TV sat, the TV is now gone. All there is are symbols and what looks like the Star of David with 4 extra points. The patio view of Rockies has become distorted. Rocks are floating, gaps of land and space and time contorting and disappearing. On the 5th day I re-enter the home. Things are how I left it on the 4th day. The man behind counter seems unfazed by the changes around him, and is still preparing meals. He asks, "Are you sure you want to continue? It seems you might need a break. Come back when you're prepared and not as ill-tempered." Before I can even speak, I'm sucked into this vortex out the front door. I haven't had a dream like that since. My boyfriend at the time and I just got off a flight and made it back to the apartment we shared. Shortly after, we got a call from our front concierge lady saying that a taxi driver was downstairs with our keys. I was confused since I had my keys. We were inside our apartment, but since a driver did just drop us off, I thought maybe a key fell off the ring or something. Suddenly, I knew something was off. I asked our concierge to ask the taxi driver where he picked us up from. He mentioned a bar I haven't been to in months, not the airport. I asked my boyfriend to come down with me to the lobby to see what was going on. Once we appeared, the driver saw both of us and ran out the door. I recognized him as a creepy driver who drove me home alone months prior, from said bar. He had remembered where I lived and was asking the concierge to tell him which apartment I lived in. The missing keys was just a ploy. Oh, this is gonna take a while to explain, but I assure you every word is the truth. I grew up in Idaho and they get a lot of snow in the winter. I was about 12 to 13 at the time and me and a couple friends went camping in the heart of December. There wasn't any adult supervision, so that was a little scary to us, but little did we know what was going to happen that night. Fast forward to the middle of the night, one of my friends had fallen asleep and the other two and I were going to try and pull an all-nighter. It was about 1 in the morning when things started to unravel. We were sitting there in the tent talking when we heard a grunting sound. Thinking it was one of my friends, I told them it wasn't funny and let's just play cards. Then we heard the sound of metal chains being thrown around from not even 50 yards away. That was followed by screaming. We had no clue what was going on, so we shut off our lights inside the tent. I unzipped the tent and peeked out of the small hole I created and saw these bright lights pointed right at our tent. I shot back into my sleeping bag and told them what I saw and that we should stay quiet. One of my friends had a machete with him and he reached in his backpack and pulled it out, and me and the others got our knives out. Maybe a half hour passed when someone was brushing their hand on the outside of the tent wall with a heavy panting and almost a sound of injury to their voice as they tried to breathe. We stayed as quiet as we could for about what felt like forever given the situation, until it finally stopped and went off in the opposite direction that the screaming came from earlier. We waited about an hour and then decided to check it out. We got up and all opened the tent and jumped out and checked our surroundings. What we saw I will never forget. The snow around the tent was covered in blood, as well as a couple spots on the exterior tent wall. There was a trail of blood off in 2 directions and we decided to go down the way the screaming came from. So much blood at the end to the trail, chains laying on the ground with blood on them. Even today when I think about it I get chills down my spine. We never found out what happened that day. For God's sake, I don't want to. I was in a really dark place when I was like age 12 through 14, and most of the time I was so stressed and sleep deprived that weird shit would happen. The scariest thing was seeing the silhouette of a man filled with stars standing in the corner of my room. It happened several nights a week for a while and it never got less unnerving. He'd just stand there blankly for a while and then charge across the room at me and disappear right as he reached me. It was honestly terrifying. I still can't sleep without a light on. I would like to know someone's explanation or thoughts of this. In southwestern Ohio I was playing video games till 2 a.m. on the big screen in the living room. I noticed a glare on the screen coming from the French doors that go out to the backyard. When I looked out the door windows, I noticed there was a glowing, moving light from the field behind my house. Our backyard was about 3 acres of open but uphill property. There was a light brush and thicket tree line that led to someone else's property, which was a clearing surrounded by trees. But the clearing was full of mature bushes that were very thick. I tried to drive a four-wheeler through it one time and my brother had to winch me out with his full-size truck, and even with that it was difficult. So I grabbed my coat and shoes and a knife and headed up the hill. When I got there, there was a tractor clearing the field with a pull-behind brush trimmer, and he was completely done and leaving when I got there at 2 a.m. I couldn't believe that even a tractor could drive through the thick brush. It was weird but made sense that I guess the guy wanted to use the field for something. I tell my mom about it that next morning and she says she was up there earlier and didn't notice a thing. At first I thought maybe I dreamed it, but I walk up there with my mom and see that the whole field is now completely plowed and seeded, free of any brush at all. My mom has been in here garden all morning and says she never heard or saw another tractor. Also, the brush that was there was completely gone, where most farmers would have just pushed it to the side of the field. There was also no rocks on the side of the field, which is common after plowing even some mature fields. Once again weird, but I guess this guy was into nighttime magic farming. So he plants corn in this field, in which I only ever saw him tending to it one time at 2 a.m., but the corn grew perfectly fine. There was never any watering or insecticide equipment around. When fall came, he never harvested his perfectly edible and fruitful corn. But instead he puts up a deer stand in one of the trees that surrounded the field. The field was surrounded by dense forest. The guy would sit up in his deer stand and shoot the deer that were in his field, which was almost normal until we realized he would shoot them, sever the head, but leave everything including the head. Our dogs started bringing home deer legs, feet and heads, and my brother and I had to pick them up and put them in the trash. This guy left that same corn crop for years but continued to shoot deer that ate from it. He decimated the local deer population in our area and never once harvested the meat. My first ever sleep paralysis experience. I think I was about 13. I recall waking up, seeing my mom at the end of my bed, and I just said, "I'll be up soon." Laid back down, fell asleep, but didn't at the same time. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I heard a ringing in my ears. It kept getting louder and louder and louder, until a child that had empty eye sockets with blood flowing out of them appeared in my vision and the ringing turned to screaming. This was just a shape as I could only see the back of my eyelids. I woke up pretty terrified nevertheless. I fell asleep on the sofa and my other half headed upstairs. I woke up to an eerie feeling, and I saw blurs of people, no shadows, nothing solid, around my head and felt really claustrophobic, struggled to breathe properly. I don't have a fear of small spaces. Asked my other half in the morning if he'd been down to check on me, go to the toilet in the night. Nope. He later admitted to having felt the house have an odd feel at times. Neither of us believe in that sort of thing, but there are times where we can't shake it. My dad still tells this story. When I was about 4 years old, I came inside and asked my dad if I could go play with the two little pig-faced, red-eyed boys just outside our fence. He asked if I knew them and I said no, they just came to the fence. The creepiest part was when he asked me how long they wanted me to play for. I replied, forever. Dad made me play in the house for the rest of the day. These kinds of things happen frequently in my family though. This was one of the creepier ones. Visited family every summer as a child up north on my mother's reservation, which was very isolated. Small house has a small window above the shower which was about 9 feet high from the outside. Cousin seen a person staring through the glazed glass and freaked when we said we were all inside. We'd leave the front door open because it was cool out. Sometimes one of us would see a silhouette of a man, lol queen, standing outside the living room or kitchen window with glowing eyes. We'd freak and wake each other up until our grandma was up and made one of us close the door and told not to stare at it. She would then burn cedar and whatnot on the wood stove and tell us to pray. Then we heard footsteps on the roof and we all lost all our shit crying, and our grams was staying true to the prayers telling to shut our little asses up. Was 6 of us. After hearing chanting and steps on the roof for what seemed like 5 minutes, it stopped and we all slept in the living room floor with Gram Law. Next morning we saw footsteps on the roof. Back to the original story about the bathroom window being so high. The house was built on a hill, so the house needed a deck and was kinda high off the ground to elevate itself against an incline. We had no ladders, so we wondered how someone was able to get so easily on the roof like that. Grams always told us that when we cried and showed fear, it was what that thing wanted, and always told us to never be afraid but pray and be strong. This is one of many people's stories people have on that res. Not gonna specify, but was a skinwalker. I got others from other family if interested. I could be rather oblivious as a kid, and very absorbed in what I do. So, when I was like 6 or 7, I was at an arcade with my cousin hard at play when a guy, must have been in his 20s, approached me and asked if I would take a photo of him and his girlfriend, who was waiting outside. I remember thinking that I couldn't be bothered, maybe after I'm done, but didn't actually say anything. After a few seconds of being ignored, he left me alone. Vaguely recall the store clerk asking them to leave. It wasn't until later that I realized it was what it was. Still sends a chill down my spine when I think of what could have happened. When I was about 12 or 13, my best friend and I used to ride our bikes to a dollar store in a close-by shopping center. I remember I was kneeling on the ground looking at the cheap makeup, and this man just comes up and stands next to me, feet slightly spread apart, with his hands on his hips and crotch at my eye level. I look up and notice that he's wearing white football pants, of the transparent variety, and a red t-shirt. His shirt was tucked into his pants in the front so that you could clearly see every outline of his junk. I was confused and uncomfortable, so I just grabbed my friend and we left the store and rode our bikes home. Years later, being a true crime junkie, I realize now that this man was a pedophile and he likely went on to do worse things than this. I wish I would have told one of the employees when it happened. I'm very fortunate that this is the most disturbing thing I have ever experienced. And #X200B, ETA missed details. TLDR spent the night alone for the first time and heard a woman call my name from a room I knew was empty. I slept on a bed of knives with all the lights on. I grew up in a large family. On top of that, my parents regularly took in kids from their brothers and sisters. We had a large house with 3 master bedrooms, but it was still cramped at times. As such, I was never alone. When I was 13, I was home alone overnight for the first time in my life. I think I had summer school and the rest of my family went to SeaWorld or something like that. That night I went room to room checking all the windows and doors and turning out the lights as I went. When I completed my check, I went across the house back towards my room. As I passed one of the bedrooms I had already checked earlier, I heard the faint sound of a woman's voice saying my name. I was so freaked out that I went to the kitchen, grabbed every single knife and then turned every light in the house on. I spent the night in the family room with all the lights on and every knife in the house under my cushion. When I was younger and Pokemon cards were a craze, for some strange reason the only place that didn't sell out of Pokemon cards was a fishing tackle shop down our road. Me and my brother went into this creepy shop and the owner was a disgusting 50-plus-year-old man. We went in just for the cards and he asked my younger brother for a crisp. My brother refused and the shopkeeper kicked off. Locked the door and phoned our mom, saying how disrespectful we had been. He then made up a story about how he was going to take us to our mom's and he tried to get us in his car. Luckily we had our bikes and just booked it out of there. I was at a Boy Scout camp and desired a slushie. I had to walk to the trading post to get it. We had to use the buddy system because of course we did, so I kidnapped my friend, Kay, to come get a slushie. So, off we went, in the dead of night, walking through the woods. Eventually, we start hearing gunshots. Kay wants to turn back, but I'm determined to get my slushie. We get almost halfway there, gunshots in the distance the whole time, and we hear a bunch of kids screaming from near the trading post. At this point, we turn back and run. But Kay has a backpack half the size of his body, so he can't run fast. We get right in front of our campsite, where there's another trail right in front of it. We hear 3 men's voices talking about something we couldn't hear. We, being the terrified 12-year-olds we were, decided that they were gonna shoot us. They were not gonna shoot us. They were part of our troop. We go back into our site and start telling people about it. One of the older scouts overhears this and says, "Oh, that was us screaming." He, along with like 7 other people, decided it'd be fun to scream at the top of their lungs for no apparent reason. Unbeknownst to us, there was a rifle range that hadn't been used before then. We were safe, but I didn't end up getting my slushie. When I was 19, I was asked out by a friend of my best friend's boyfriend at the time. I didn't know him well, but I figured her boyfriend was super cool, so his friend couldn't be bad. For our first date, he met me at my work in my town after I finished my shift, and we drove to a local hockey game together where he got to meet another best friend of mine and we all went out for drinks afterwards. Later he drove me home because I had walked to work, and then he proceeded to unload a ton of emotional crap on me about how he could see us married with kids one day and how he really thought that I was exactly the kind of person he was looking for. I was for obvious reasons put off and said a polite good night and basically resigned myself to declining a second date. About a week later I met some friends to go to a wedding social and he was there. He clung to me like we were together and lost his shit when an off and on flame of mine pulled me aside and asked me to dance. This guy got rather drunk, and me being sober, I decided I would drive him home if it would get him to leave. This was a very stupid, naive thing for me to do, as I didn't realize how unhinged this guy really was. He cried in my car for 30 minutes when I explained that he and I weren't together, and in a very kind way let him know that I wasn't interested in pursuing a relationship. He lost his shit, screamed at me and grabbed his sweater off the floor of my car and slammed the door so hard it shattered the window, which made him cry even more. At that point I didn't even want to contact him to ask for him to replace it, I was so unnerved. Turns out when he left though, he accidentally grabbed my friend's sweater too, and he wouldn't give it back to her unless I was the one picking it up. I declined and my friend understood. For nearly 4 months after, I would see his rather distinct silver Pontiac with a cracked front bumper and rear window sticker absolutely everywhere. He would show up places that I'd see his car parked across the street from my work or down the street from my house. The tipping point was when I found my friend's sweater in my kitchen after like 4 months of him stalking me. Please excuse spelling and grammar. This happened back in 2010 when I was 22. I get off work one day and head home to my apartment. When I get home, my roommate is there with some guy the first had never met before. My introduces me to him. Let's call him Carl, a coworker, and he needs a place to crash for the night. I am like cool and said nice to meet ya, some small talk. Right off I get a bad vibe from Carl. He creeped me out, but I brushed it off and went about my after work business. An hour later or so my is like, hey dude, I am taking off. I am going to my GF place for the night. Well, that didn't sit well with me. Leave some dude here I haven't met before, that's not cool. We go back and forth for a minute before I am like whatever, it's cool. Mind you, I still had a creepy, off feeling about this Carl guy. My takes off and I go chill in the living room with Carl. The entire time Carl's phone is blowing up with text messages, to the point where it was getting annoying while I watched TV. I said to Carl, damn man, you're a popular guy. Can you put it on silent? Carl's like, oh yeah, no problem, sorry. It's this girl I've been hooking up with. Another hour goes by and I couldn't take the creepy feeling this guy gave me anymore. So, I was like, alright man, I am calling an early night. Good meeting ya, and I retired to my room. It's the next day, after work, back at my apartment having a beer with my and I tell him straight up that Carl was a creep. How he gave me a bad feeling and don't bring him around anymore, etc. My laughs and says you have no idea. Which naturally I had to ask him if he cared to elaborate on what he meant by that. And boy did he. Apparently a year earlier Carl had a GF. One night Carl and his GF got into a fight. After the fight the GF was in the kitchen, had a seizure, hit her head on the counter and died. That's the story Carl gave the police. The police investigated of course and found his story suspicious, no history of seizures, but could not prove any foul play. 6 months later Carl has a new GF, and guess what happened? Carl and the GF get into a fight. After the fight the GF has a seizure, she falls, hits her head and dies. The police really investigate this one, but again, they can't prove foul play. Now about 6 months later this creep Carl is crashing on my couch for the night, texting a new love interest, or more like victim. Fucking disgusting. When my told me this I of course called him out. You're messing with me, right? He swore up and down he was not. He claims Carl was the one who told him all this. Carl had no problem talking about it. Or as I said, bragging about it. The vibe Carl gave me makes me tend to believe my Me asking my why he thought it was a good idea to bring this guy around, let alone dump him on me, is an angry story for another time. As far as did Carl ever get arrested? I have no idea. I tried googling it but I found nothing. And Carl quit the mill shortly after and my never saw him again. This is the creepiest, most unnerving and strange thing to ever happen to me. I have 2 thematically related stories. Story 1. When I was a kid, I could hear WW2 style air raid sirens coming from somewhere near my house at random times on random days. I eventually got used to them, figured they were testing them or something. This was in the late 90s and I lived in London, UK. Have no idea why they would even still have those old sirens. TLDR. Creepy air raid sirens. Story 2. When I was in my teens, me and some of my annoying friends used to get on underground trains to random destinations in order to take weird routes home. On the London Underground, the name for the underground metro service, you only used your ticket for getting into the network and leaving, so you only paid once, even if you took 10 trains to get there. So one time, my friend at the time tells me there's a really cool door in one of the underground stations. I was bored, so went to have a look. It was weird. From a platform, you could open a door and there was this huge spiral staircase, leading even deeper underground. We went in and the stairs just kept going and going. There was no one else there and I started to get the feeling we were not supposed to be there. Anyway, eventually, we reached the bottom. It felt like we were super deep underground, but there was another platform here. The platforms were empty and I noticed the station was painted in the old 30s colors rather than the 70s or 80s design that we came from. Which was pretty weird. I had only ever seen stations looking like that in history documentaries. So, after waiting a minute or so, a train approaches. As it comes out of the darkness in the tunnel and emerges into the light of the platform, I see that the train isn't normal either. This also looked like a really old train, not anything like the ones we saw on any of the other lines. From the style, it looked like something from the 30-50s, it was hard to tell exactly, but it was also empty except for one woman. It was only when we got on the train that the friend casually told me we need to keep our heads down because we're not supposed to be on that train, which explained the weird look the woman gave us. There are no trains that you are not supposed to be on the London Underground, so I noped out at the next station and found our way back out into a normal station through another spiral staircase. Strange thing was that I never found that door again in either of those same two stations, and it's not marked on any maps I've seen. TLDR. Some kind of extra creepy ghost, secret train underneath the underground trains. The house that we lived in was haunted. The entities never did anything dangerous. My wife, myself and our 2 small children lived in the house for about 10 years. All the activity seemed to be centered around the upstairs bedrooms, bathroom and the landing at the top of the stairs. The activity would come and go. When we first moved in, we would hear conversations going on. You couldn't make out what was being said, but you could hear the voices. This happened quite often. You would hear footsteps going up and down the wooden stairs in the middle of the night. When downstairs, you would hear footsteps from upstairs when there wasn't anybody up there. When giving the kids a bath, you would get the distinct feeling of someone watching you. You would turn around and there wouldn't be anyone there. One morning, I was getting dressed in our bedroom and my wife was getting ready in the bathroom just down the hall. We both came out at the same time and asked each other, "Did you say something?" Neither one of us did, but we both heard something. On another morning, I had just taken a shower and was drying off when I heard someone sigh directly behind me. My back was about 6 inches from a wall. Probably the most unnerving thing was this. We had purchased a new house and were waiting for closing to take place on this house. During this period, I would stop in and check on the house occasionally. During my last visit, I had made my checks in the basement and the first floor when I started to walk up the stairs. There was a window on the landing at the top of the stairs. I had just started up the stairs, when a large dark mass went from left to right from the hallway, blocked out the light coming through the window and went into my old bedroom. It took me a few seconds to process what had just happened, but the hair on the back of my neck stood straight up and I ran up the stairs to chase whatever it was. When I went into the bedroom, there was nothing there. That was the last time I went into that house. Now that my kids are in their teens, they say they remember weird things going on when they were younger, though they never said anything at the time.